Hi, Jolly. Hey, can you hear me? Hey, can you hear me?
I'm on phone. Sorry. Yes, I can hear you fine. Can you hear me?
I can't hear you though. I don't hear anything. I don't know. Oh, try now.
How about now?
Okay, yeah. There you are.
Exactly. Sorry, I'm on like the bus right now.
No, you're fine.
If I could change my background.
What?
Like maybe I could change my background.
I can't hear you very well.
Yeah, it's a little loud here. With the bus, it's because of the bus moving. It's pretty loud.
I can't hear you, but I think it's fine. I don't think you'll have to talk too much, so hopefully that's not a problem. We'll just give people a minute to get together.
Okay.
Yeah, did you receive all of those emails, Jolly?
Yeah, I did. I went through everything, so we can follow up with like maybe a separate call. But I'm guessing you guys will discuss the on this call as well.
We'll have what as well?
Oh, I'm saying I'll discuss it more with you, but I'm guessing we're going to discuss it more on this call too. But I did go through everything. Yeah.
Hi. Hey guys.
Some loud noise in my background right now. Sorry.
Joe, do you want to start us off, or are we waiting on anybody else to join?
Sure. I see a notification. Yeah, no, I can. This is going to be recorded, so we can also, anyone who's late, we can post it for them to view later. So yeah, we can go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Joe, and Joe Nisbet, and I'm a landscape architect and community planner first. I've been a permaculture designer for 6 years now, and I started the public land protocol based off of some of the issues that I've seen with existing, in the nonprofit regenerative design space, some problems. The earth is rapidly declining, and there's things that we can do to leverage blockchain technology to make it better. So I've been a crypto investor for years now, and DeFi degenerate for just shy of 1 year. And I've been in the Web3 development space for only about 2 months now. So this is a brand new public land protocol, is only a few weeks old. And so thank you all for being here. You're like some of our early supporters, and I'm so glad to see that you're here. So that's me, and that's my background. And now, Katie, if you would like to introduce yourself. Katie, you're muted.
Okay, hi. So I'm also new, like Joe, to crypto, and I've done crypto trading, but also to Web3 and development and creating a DAO, and just realizing the possibilities that are out there for tokenization. And Joe came to me with this idea, and we've been thinking it out and planning for a hackathon in February. But about talking about what it is and the possibilities is just really incredible, to be able to tokenize land and keep it for public use is the idea behind this. And so creating rewards for investors, and it's basically land that can be held indefinitely, and used to create parks and hiking trails, and basically be kept for public use. So that's kind of the overall vision, and it's almost in a way like land owning itself. We're looking at how to establish the government model behind that, and how everything would work. So
Yeah, so now if anyone else would like to introduce yourself, tell us, what you're working on, if you're already, in the blockchain space, if you have that kind of experience, or whatever other background you have, please share now.
Yeah, so Katie, I know Katie. My name's Chris. I've known Katie for a little while now, and through a different world, but I'm an investor in crypto. I've been in it for a little over a year now, mostly layer ones, Bitcoin, ETH, and all the others. But the NFT space, the whole Web3 is very interesting, very new. But I'm very interested in, and when Katie told me what this was about, it is very interesting because it's a little bit more about what we can do for the future if it works out well, and less, about us, So I love the idea and concept of it.
thank you, Chris.
Yeah, thanks for being here. We're glad you're here.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm definitely interested in helping out and doing anything I can.
So this morning we had a Zoom with Rebuild, and they're a Swiss-based nonprofit. And so what they're doing is regenerative land for villages. And their first land project is in Paraguay, where they have 44 community members living and caring for land there. And so, yeah, so I mean, the vision is already happening. It's really cutting edge, but where I feel like, this is definitely where we're going in the future is being able to use the DeFi network, and also the financing tools that fund projects. The funding is out there and available too, which is amazing that how much money is there to be granted for nonprofits right now that can come up with the right ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know if you guys are on Twitter, there's a lot of stuff going on. I would follow the hashtag ReFi, REFI, or regenerative finance. But one of the, big inspirations for me in starting this project is the Toucan Protocol. And they're basically tokenizing carbon offsets and allowing the money that's already in, crypto investors have in DeFi, and allowing access to that to purchase carbon. And so that's been a huge jumping off point for, where can blockchain technology take this regenerative movement? And I'm seeing a really bright future. So I'm so glad that you guys are here. The basics, for public land protocol, the specifics of what we're working on are the asset tokenization of real world assets. So if you're familiar with NFTs or other DAOs and DAO treasuries, they're able to hold certain assets in common, and then the token holders each own a share ownership in the base asset. And so what we're interested in is what happens when that intersects the real world. And my background in permaculture and regenerative design, I see ways that we can access way more money to give to these nonprofits and these land trusts that are already doing an amazing job to make sure that there's room for nature in the future. So we're really interested in, figuring out what does that look like? How can we access that capital? How can we give that to these people who are holding land regeneratively? And then the second piece is Dao governance. So how can we come together to democratically own, these real world assets? And what does that look like for the future of civic engagement? And right now politics is so boring, it's awful, nobody believes they have a voice in anything, and blockchain is 100% transparent. You can see exactly where all of the votes went, and there's these new opportunities to engage with decision making. And so I'm seeing a win-win-win scenario where these regenerative land stewards can raise funds from crypto investors and then also find new forms of engagement with a younger generation. Typically in the regenerative design field, I'm seeing the majority of people, I would say, are 40 plus. So there is kind of a generational gap, and these people who really care for the planet, there was kind of the first wave of hippies, and what if blockchain is the thing that brings in the younger crowd and really makes it accessible and digital native? So that's kind of our shtick. That's what we're working on, and we're in the very early phases. It's all brand new. We're still figuring things out, and we're still trying to figure out the product market fit for what solutions we're developing, and where they fit into that. So I guess, does anyone have any questions on any of the intro or like the basic idea? I have a little bit of an agenda, and so yeah, if you have a question, you can raise a hand or put it in the chat or say something now. Yeah, go ahead.
You may this, but I'm curious to see the governance. Have you laid out a vision for the governance itself, like I don't know, a mission statement and all that stuff? Because I think that's really, really important. I'm sure you probably are working on that, because the DAO attracts people if the vision aligns with what other people out there want to do. So I think that's a huge important point. And I bring back, I always think about that Constitution DAO that just happened about 2 months ago or whatever, and how much money they were able to raise. Unfortunately, they didn't win it, but it was all over social media, all over the mainstream. And so I think getting the word out there to everyone, but the mission statement has to align in order to do that.
Absolutely. Great question. Yeah, we are still in the early phases. We're still working on it. We have been, that goes great into my next, thing that I wanted to talk about is what me and Katie have been up to. So me and Katie are both co-founders, and we'll talk more about it later, but we're still open to finding new founding members and forming this core team to develop this. But we have been working on Google Drive with an outline of the white paper and what that would look like. I can tell you the bones of it right now are that we are researching the legal side of how can the legal entity in the US own the land that's controlled by the DAO tokens. So that's one piece of it. And then the next piece for permaculture design, we've partnered with the Institute of Regenerative Design. One of my mentors, Alan Booker, has developed the Biocompatible design standards. And so it's basically, we're going to be able to form a rating system to be able to assign an ethical framework to the land. Is it caring for the water and the nutrient cycles? Is it making room for habitat and nature? Is there sustainable business going on, and the people cultural aspect as well? So they have some building blocks of that we can work out, and that kind of plugs into our mission. For what our mission is to increase the amount of land that's being held for regeneration. So we want to hold that land into perpetuity, and we believe that DAOs as an organizational structure have the ability to last hundreds or thousands of years, longer than these other types of organizations or family held land, the way that things are typically done now. We really believe that this new technology is going to enable that. So that's kind of the bones of what the mission statement looks like at this moment. And there's so many specifics that we need to go into. But yeah, and we're working out on a fig jam. We have a whiteboard kind of playing around with the organizational structure of, the core team itself and the contributors to public land protocol. And if you're familiar with holacracy or sociocracy, we're kind of working with multiple circles of authority and the different domains that they have authority over, so that it's easy for a contributor to just jump straight in.
We kind of want to bridge the gap between real world and technology. And so we want to extremely simplify this process so that it's not, this conversation of crypto and it doesn't scare away anyone who's not tech savvy. So
Right.
we're looking at how do we create this access for everyone? And maybe that's jumping onto a website, buying a token, and then easily looking at an area on the map that you're interested in and going and voting on land. But the point is in the Dao governance is so that the land acts on behalf of the token holders.
Mhm.
And by fractionalizing it, we hope that it stays permanently, for the public. But we're looking at, we've simplified our model because we were in the beginning looking at being owners of the land, which we could still be in the future, owning the land under the nonprofit and what that would look like. But to simplify it, it's thinking of us as the matchmakers between these organizations who are already doing it, who are already trying to create funds to do these projects, but they need the connection to the crypto community that can help them with the funding. So we're looking at partners who currently have land, who are interested in us basically experimenting with them to start with, and trying to help them with funding their projects and through having this being put on the DAO, basically. Yeah.
And then the other thing we've been working on is we're forming these relationships. We're building the Twitter and the Discord. We've had several Zoom calls with other people in the regenerative finance space, and we're trying to figure out where our specific angle kind of fits into all these other players. And then we've been working on grants. There's 2 grants coming up that I have my eye on. One of them is more permaculture based, and one of them is Seed Gives, if you're familiar with the Seeds project on the Ethereum network. So they've previously funded permaculture based work before. And so, we're working on securing that money to help ensure that the founding team can really focus on this and at least a part-time kind of capacity. And pay for those legal fees in the beginning so that we can make sure we have a solid structure that other people can use and feel confident in. And then the other thing I was going to say that we've been working on is we have been accepted to submit to the Sovereign Nature Initiative Hackathon in February. So February 4th through 6th are the dates to remember. If you guys are available, we are still forming the project team. We'd love to have more, like-minded people to work together with this. We have a few people that have more of the tech savvy side that I'm going to be able to pull in to help us out with the team. But, especially if you have, an understanding of the blockchain or the tech development side, that's currently missing from being in their core team. And that's going to be a specific village. It could be another property, but right now there's a village in Amsterdam, and they have already done a lot of work to kind of co-create with nature a really beautiful space and do gardening and mediating the land from all the heavy metals. So they're doing some really interesting work, and that'll be the focus of the hackathon in February. So that is kind of the list of where we're at, what we've been doing for the last few weeks. And then starting in January, we're going to do weekly calls, like the community calls. We'll record them and post them. And then we'll be able to continue to work and develop a specific app or technology that we're going to propose to the owners and members of Pavel. Is there
Yeah,
anything
so-
else I'm forgetting we've been doing, Katie?
No, I mean, that about sums it up. But if we get picked as winners for the hackathon, it's a grant to start funding. And the focus is to address the sovereign nature and principles of non-human life. So it's this really in-depth topic, but basically they want us to think of innovations and ways to establish government models to empower ecosystems. So they're giving us that property that they're already have been working on and doing things for as an example, but we could choose any other kind of partner property if it inspires us. They said go for it, but you know we will probably use the one in Amsterdam that they've provided for us to use. But it's really, really cool if you guys want to be a part of it.
Is there any information, like where could you find that? That seems interesting to look it up on the internet and all that stuff.
We'll share it on
Drop
the
the
Discord.
email in
It's
the chat.
sovereignnature.com, I think is their website.
And
And they
drop
do,
your email in the Zoom chat, Chris, and I'll send
Okay.
you a little bit of information. Anyone else,
Yeah,
you can
great.
email it.
I mean, obviously being so new and starting out, I think everybody's voices is important. And I love the concept. So I'm excited I'll definitely be a part of it going forward.
cool.
Nice. We're so glad to have you.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is going to be really fun. I think we're like onto something really big. We're going to be really early, and more people are going to get onto this over the next several months, several years, several decades.
Yeah.
There's some cool stuff you can see, you know, the direction that DAOs are going to start owning more and more stuff and are going to start having a bigger impact on corporate structure worldwide. So yeah, I'm really excited for the
One follow-up question. It's sort of hard to define, but right now, like the SEC Commissioner Gensler, he's talked about securities and how some of these tokenized things become securities. That's really important to keep in mind, that the landscape may be changing if they deem it to be so. So making sure that the structure is such that that is avoided is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a US based team, the US SEC is, you know, our number one, you know, regulatory agency that we want to be compliant with. We plan to be fully compliant, and I feel confident that we can have a non-security cryptocurrency token that we can offer land stewards to act as a governance token. There's the CRC, the Cryptocurrency Regulatory Commission, or whatever it's called, that has a ratings guideline for what makes a cryptocurrency into a security. And that's one of what our legal fees that we're raising grant money for will go towards, is defining
Okay.
the entity that holds the real world asset, which is probably a trust that has specific bylaws that allows the Dao governance to be included in the decision making of the trust assets. And then there's the cryptocurrency security, you know, question whether or not. And so we are planning to get some sort of I forget what it's called, like a letter of intent or whatever. Basically, a lawyer saying that what we're proposing is not a security. The biggest thing that we're trying to do is ensure that it's not a security, because right now these other NFTs for real estate, they run into that problem where you have to be an accredited investor with $1 million liquid cash to be able to purchase a token representing the land. And we feel good about the idea that as the governance token, you are okay with a land steward entity owning the land. You just want to be involved and support that landowner. So there's not a direct backing of the real world asset that you have an equity ownership position in. So basically that's our angle. And then there's other things that we can do with how the tokens are distributed and funded to make sure that we're fully compliant. But yeah, that's on our radar. And that's what we need to raise funds for, to hire, you know, like a good solid lawyer to look at all of our stuff.
Yeah, I did a Zoom call with Proppy yesterday, and so they are tokenizing real estate for real estate sales, and they're using land trusts. But their issue that they brought on, they needed a brainstorm call, was that they're trying to create digital twins of real life real estate, and so they have been working on this for a few years, like over 3 years, and still are running into problems. They're still at the beginning stages of it. And so I don't really understand how, real estate is selling, I guess in the metaverse it is, but in real life real estate, actually selling and having fractional ownership is still in the beginning stages where they haven't figured out all the quirks of that yet. Whereas, this is not ownership, it's governance. So it's kind of like it's a loophole around that in a way. And it's also easy to mint these governance tokens. So, I mean, the technical side of it is easier as well. But yeah, I mean, we could cut it short here. Thank everybody for you guys joining on and continuing to follow us, and we'll do follow-up calls and prepare for this hackathon in February and try to put more ideas together in our model.
Yeah, everyone on the call, do some reading over the holiday break, and let's plan on doing weekly calls in January. We can find a time that works for everyone. And yeah, I'm so excited to see you guys are here. Follow us on Twitter, and then get in the Discord. That's like a industry thing. That'll be the main location of conversation and chat. If I get your emails, if you put in the Zoom link, we can add you guys to the Google Drive and the whiteboard session, so you can dig around what we've already been working on, and then that's where we'll start in January and hit the ground running. So yeah, thank you so much for being here.
POAP tokens for being here, and we hope in the future we can look back and look back at the early people who were here at our startup phase and do raffles and early access or certain access to things. But yeah, we're gonna send those too.
So I'm putting it in the chat now. This should be live at this moment. It's poap.website/PLP for Public Land Protocol. So if you are very new to crypto and you do not have a wallet, this will be a fun first step for you to do. This is a free NFT token. It's going to be minted on the XDAI network, and eventually you can port it to the Ethereum network. So it'll be a fun little exploration for you if you're brand new, but we will be able to, so you need to claim the link that I just sent should take you to a website while you're claiming it. If you do not have a wallet and you need help, you can go to MetaMask. I'll put that in the link in the chat as well. It's metamask.io. And there's an iOS app, and there's also there's like a Chrome extension if you're on a desktop platform. But this link expires the end of tomorrow. I don't think it's tonight at midnight. I think it's tomorrow night at midnight. So just go ahead and claim it, and that's a great first step introduction. Form yourself a wallet, write down all of your passphrase, and then this is a free NFT, and we will be able to track who was there in the beginning and potentially reward you guys with tokens later on. So I think that's everything. Thank you guys so much for being here. If you have more questions, I will drop my personal email in the chat as well. Just in case you get stuck like forming a wallet or any of that stuff. I want to make sure you get the POAP before it expires, because once it's expired, I won't be able to create it, again for anyone either.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Joe. And Katie, thank you for bringing me on board, and I'm excited to see what happens. Got a lot to offer, so I'm excited.
It's going to be fun. I mean, if anything, we're at the very beginning of something so new, and just to dive into it and experiment is going to be really fun. So, and to do some good for the planet.
Yeah. Well, kids, being a father, it's important. So, all right, guys. Well, thank you.
Bye. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Yeah.
Bye.